Did you notice I made the intro shorter?
Did not, but welcome to Clear Point Crystal Studios. I'm Luann Morris, and this is Deborah Colleen Rose, and she's here today to tell you her audio story. It's an audio biography story. So last week, we talked a lot about her childhood. I say a lot, but I asked her this week to kind of talk about her dad and her grandpa who were in law enforcement. So take it away, Deborah.
Okay, so it's interesting to be talking about my dad today because on New Year's Day, that'll be the anniversary of his death for 2 years. He died at about 3 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day 2 years ago. And what was interesting about his passing is that I was working a New Year's Eve party that night, and Scott picked me up, and it was after midnight. It's about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I told him, I said, I've got to call my dad. And he had been on my mind all night long while I was working, but I couldn't, leave the party and call him or anything. And then of course that morning about 6:30 in the morning, I got a call from my stepmom telling me that he had passed. And it's weird to me, but that happens to me all the time when someone in my family passes. I get this urge to call them, or I know something's about to happen, even if I'm not close to that person. And so I always get this jingling in my head, so to speak. But I will say this: I am so glad the way my dad passed, the way my stepmother relates it. We should all be as lucky as he was. He had a lot of health problems, and then he was going to be 91, his birthday that January. And he had COPD, and so he always had trouble breathing and things. And he got up to go to the bathroom, and he came back, and he was sweaty. And so normally at night when he was sweaty, my stepmom would wipe him down with a cool rag or whatever, and she was wiping him down, and he just kind of leaned back into her arms, she said, and then he just got light as a feather. And she laid him down, and he was just very peaceful and didn't struggle or anything. And she knew he had already passed. And I thought, what a lovely way to go from this world in the arms of someone that loves you and cares for you.
Yep.
And I never would have expected that for my dad, honestly, because he'd had such an emotionally up and down roller coaster life. And toward the latter years of his life, he got very angry, even more so than normal, and very bitter by my estimation, and was not happy in general. So I was just thinking about that last night and thought, oh, I got to talk to Luann about this tomorrow, because I knew we were going to be meeting. So
yeah,
what a lovely way, though, to go leave
I
this
think
world.
so.
Yeah.
My dad kind of went that way. I wasn't actually with him. He was with his girlfriend. So
Yeah.
hopefully it went just about the same way.
Yeah. It's much better than going screaming in a car wreck or with someone putting a pillow over your head, which is what I've told Scott to do to me. If I ever get dementia, I'm like, just put a pillow over my face. I
Yeah,
don't. And he's like, well, how would I know if you have dementia? And I'm like, oh, good point.
you'll know. You'll know.
Well, with me, you know what my nickname is? What
No,
he called me? Random girl. I was just chewing his butt out the other night, just in the middle of, not really chewing him out, but just like, look, this needs to happen and blah, blah, blah. And I'm really stressed. And all of a minute, I'm like, oh, look, more Norman. I'm mid-sentence. Because I had just been thinking about Merle Norman earlier that morning in a conversation, because we'd been talking about beauty control. So anyway,
Good Lord.
I know. I know. It's never a dull moment. So, but anyway,
Exactly.
my dad was a police officer, and he used to, before I was born, he worked driving the hearse and running errands and odd jobs at the mortuary, the funeral home. And then he drove a gravel truck, and then he drove some other kind of truck, and then he worked at the police department. And so this is when, this is what I know more about him than anything from personal experiences, the police department. And then when he left the police department, he went to work at Red River Depot Arsenal Depot, or whatever you call it, where they make all kinds of things for the military outside of Texarkana and New Boston. And there's a really an unusual story about why my dad left the police department. And all this happened like in, I think, a year, based upon my memory time frame of him leaving the police department and him and my mom getting a divorce. And my dad used to work extra hours doing security at the Cooper tire plant in Texarkana, which is a big, huge company there, and it provides thousands of jobs for people in the area. And based on what I've been told and the things I've heard and stuff, my dad was accused of stealing tires for his vehicle. And he had a running feud with, isn't it weird? I remember this name, Max Tackett, who was in charge of the police department, because you know how bad I am with names. And so he got fired. And then supposedly later on, his name got cleared and he could have taken his job back at the police department, but he didn't. And um, through the magic of Facebook, several years ago, I was talking to someone in one of the groups about Texarkana, and he told me that he had worked with my dad on the police department
Oh, wow.
and had nothing but praise for him. And I'm like, tell me the truth, don't hold back, don't sugarcoat it. I want to know who my dad is or was. And he goes, no, he goes, your dad was great to work with, and he cared about people, and he was, very good with people. And, the only thing I can tell you is that your dad had a fascination with knives. Well, I know that's the truth. Because I gave my dad probably over 300 or 400 knives myself because I collected them as collateral during my bail bond years. And I didn't need all those knives, so I gave him a bunch of them. And so anyway, I've often wondered why he didn't take his job back at the police department. I'm sure there's a lot more involved in that story than what I know.
Well, kind of breaking trust, isn't it?
Yeah, it's breaking trust. And also, I guess you just reach a point where you're tired of beating your head against a brick wall if you know someone doesn't like you. Been there myself. Know what that's, you finally reach a point where is money more important or is peace of mind more important? And while I have tried to always pick money, I've always gone with peace of mind in the
Yeah.
my peace of
Yeah.
mind is very important to me.
So how many years then was he with the police department?
Oh, I think probably between 7 to 10, probably. My Uncle Buddy, who worked on the Texas side, this was on the Arkansas side that my dad worked, because Texarkana is two cities. There's one in Arkansas and one in Texas. They're called the Twin Cities. And my Uncle Buddy retired from the police department as a captain, and he was my dad's older brother. Then, of course, Granddaddy was on the fire department, and then he retired from that, and then he had some part-time jobs with the city. And then he was a really hard worker, though, because he used to work a job at the cotton gin part-time. He always had big garden at his house, and then he had a big garden outside the cotton gin on their property. So we were always out in the garden pulling weeds and stuff when we're over at their house. And I can remember eating tomatoes straight from the plant. Green onions, oh my God, green onions are the best thing in the world. Who
Yeah,
knew?
when they're straight out of the ground, you just kind of knock the dirt off and
Yeah, yeah, you just go for it. And so, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm really healthy. Here I am at my age. I'm not on any medication. I just think we ate healthy back then. We had a lot of fresh vegetables and things. And of course, there was a lot of side roadside people selling vegetables. And being a police officer, I don't know if this is normal or not, but my experience is that people gave my dad a lot of things, and I don't know if it was because they loved him or if it was payoff for the police
But
department.
sometimes it's just appreciation. I've been in a restaurant and paid for lunches just because we appreciate them
Well,
doing their job.
that's what I think. But people always are going to allege the negative if you give them the opportunity. But we always had the best toys. We had, swing sets, and my dad had a really good friend, Gene Blevins, who had a welding shop there in Texarkana. And he would go there and weld things for Gene and make extra money. And he made us a really neat pedal car when I was little, and it looked like an army Jeep, and it was painted up with and all that, and you just pedal your. But I outgrew that thing real quick. I was really tall. There's a videotape of me and my brothers riding a go-kart up and down the street in front of our house, and it's I mean, I'm as tall as my dad. And so I can remember scrunched up on that go-kart with my knees almost hitting me in the chest. But I was only like in third grade maybe, and I'm already as tall as my dad, And but both my grandfathers were over 6 foot. So, and I am built like a linebacker,
Yep.
so to speak. As a woman, I have a big bone frame, and I am built a lot like my grandfather, my dad's dad, granddaddy. So I got stuck.
You got stuck. Well, so let's see. Your dad was a kind of a jack of all trades, yeah?
My dad was very handy with his hands. He worked on engines and motors, and he did all kinds of things, and he had a repair shop for chainsaws when he moved into his new house on the Texas side of Texarkana after my parents got divorced. Knew how to work on lawnmowers and things like that. But my mom always said that he was lazy and things didn't get done at our house, but he was always doing things for other people. My dad was definitely a people person. He liked socializing. Um, Even when he was up in age, there were people always dropping by his house just to come by and say hi. My dad was a lot of fun, except at home, and I thought he was fun at home too, but he and my mom, I don't know, they clashed a lot. Frankly, I have to wonder at this late date if she had not been pregnant with me, if they would have remarried. I think they had one of those relationships where they couldn't stay away from each other, but they didn't do well together, you know?
Yeah. One where they would have been okay if they'd had separate domicile.
Yeah, or just, been friends with benefits or something, which it sounds like they kind of were for 5 years till she got pregnant. But my dad, he taught me how to hunt. He taught me how to fish. I mean, okay, so this is the kind of effect my dad had on me. You remember those creepy crawlers kits where you'd pour the goo in the molds and you'd heat them
Hmm.
up and
Hmm.
you can make all these kind of creepy things like spiders and snakes?
Yep.
I did that. I had one of those. I loved that thing. But I got the bright idea that I could do all these different colors and then I could put fish hooks in them while they were setting up. And I sold them to the neighborhood kids for fishing lures. I was an entrepreneur at a very early age, very early age.
Hey,
So
that was a glimpse of things to come.
yeah, I don't know. It was just part of my upbringing. I remember I desperately wanted one of the Smokey the Bear stuffed bears when they came out. Oh my God, I don't know why. Maybe it was a fetish. I don't know, but I love Smokey the Bear.
I don't know. I think a lot of kids our age did.
Well, I wanted one of those, and which is an interesting thing for me because I didn't really like toys. Okay, hold that thought. So I didn't have a lot. I had a lot of toys, but I didn't play with them. Number one, we weren't allowed to take our toys outside because they'd get dirty. And we weren't allowed to play inside. So I didn't get a chance to play with my toys much, unless it was rainy or cold or something. But I wanted one of those bears. And so I went through the neighborhood with my little red wagon for weeks, picking up empty drink bottles because this was when they were like 2 cents to return them. And
Mhm.
I got enough, you do the math, I got enough Coke bottles together to buy my own Smokey the Bear.
Wow.
And I couldn't have been probably more than 6 at the time. So getting out and making money for whatever reason to get what you want was instilled in me at a very early age. And nothing gave me more pleasure though than for my dad to use one of my little creepy crawler lures to go fishing.
Yeah.
So that was cool for me. But my dad was a hard taskmaster too. We had to paste wax our wood furniture. When I say we, I mean me. And I can remember that, and I can remember I'm tall for my age, but I can remember being short enough that I had to stand on a step ladder to paste wax our car. Okay. And if I didn't do it right, I had to do it over. So you did the job until you got it right. Now I'm not that rigid now. It's like, okay, that's good enough for government work. We're going with it. But now being in the private investigation business, I have to kind of reframe that a little bit because I always use the test of, is this a good enough report? It's like, how is this going to stand up in court? How can they pick it apart? Where are there holes in this statement? And so, but I always have a test that I have to go by. Okay, I got it off track. I know. That's
Yeah,
your
that's
job,
okay.
keep me on track.
So your dad taught you to hunt and fish. So were you close to your grandfather?
I think I was close to my grandfather. My grandfather gave me my first concussion, though.
Oops.
So, so this is an interesting little tidbit about my family. My uncle Buddy and his son Michael, both were like the grand poobahs of the Mason Lodge there in Texarkana at one time. Michael got removed as the grand poobah. They took his picture down and spit on it, whatever they do, because he got arrested and convicted of a felony.
Oh no.
Yeah, it had something to do with this business that he was running, and he was ripping people off. He was putting the stuff that you put around mobile homes on the bottom to seal them off. I don't know what all was involved. This is way after we're all older. So he got removed. But my grandfather was never allowed to be a Mason, and I don't even know if he wanted to, but I was told that he was not allowed to be a Mason because he was not whole, because part of his finger had been cut off at the knuckle, and in some kind of saw accident or something. I don't remember the details. I'll have to ask around, see if I can find out. So it was like pure bone to the end. I mean, you could feel the bone in the tip of his finger, and that part of the finger was missing. So it was that long. And so I don't know if that was just an excuse to keep him out of the Masons, because my granddaddy had as many enemies as he had friends, because he was a very outspoken, very determined man. He was a scary man. Okay, this is how scary he was. This guy pissed him off. This is way before I was born. I don't, so this is when he was in his probably 30s. This guy pissed him off, and to wreak havoc on this man's mental health, he tied them to a train track. And unbeknownst to this man, and I have people swear this is true because it doesn't sound true, but I have people swear it's true that they witnessed it. I remember hearing this as a child, and that there was a fork just before where they tied him up, but you couldn't see it. And the train went one way and he was on the other track. And my granddad says, next time you'll be on the other track. Don't mess with me. Now that does sound like my granddad.
And he wasn't a police officer, right? He was a
No, he was
fireman.
a fireman. He was a fireman. And I used to play the the firehouse was up a block from where he lived. So I would go up there to see him a lot. And they had a pool table up there, and the firemen were always cooking and playing pool and cleaning the truck. And I got to not play on the truck excessively, but I got to sit up there and honk the horn, things like that sometimes. And I remember one of the firemen saying, "Well, Captain, don't you think that child needs to get off that truck?" And he turned to that man, he goes, "What's that child's last name?" And he goes, "Rose." And he goes, "I don't think she's getting down." So that kind of feeds in to how I perceived our family in Texarkana, because people knew us, they recognized us. when my dad would take me to get coffee, or we go someplace, just visit all these people he knows, they'd have gifts for us, things of that nature. So, but anyway, my granddaddy gave me my first concussion. He was sitting in his chair watching the news one day, and me and my cousin Lisa were running around hooping and hollering, blah, blah, blah. And Mimi was a little strident. That was his wife, my grandmother. And she's going, Dee, can't you make those kids be quiet? We worked her last nerves a lot. She didn't like noise, and she was high strung. And he goes, y'all need to settle down. The old woman's in there. She's hollering, you know. And he was always, I don't know, disrespecting her. I guess he thought he was being funny because he was saying it in a funny way, but he was always disparaging her. And so we didn't pay any attention to him. And about the second time he said that, I ran in front of of his chair, and he took that finger and he hit me on top of my head, and I dropped like a ton of bricks.
God.
And I woke up, and I hear Mimi screaming, Dee, you've killed her. You've killed her. And about that time, I opened my eyes, and he goes, oh, she's all right. And they set me up and gave me a glass of water and then told me to go outside and play.
Take it off.
Yeah, you shook
Are
it
you
off.
dying? Walk it off.
Exactly. So I'm pretty sure that was my first concussion. Pretty sure.
Yeah, I used to tell my kids, are you bleeding in 3 places? No. Okay, you're fine.
Yeah, pretty much, pretty much. That's the way it was. If you're not vomiting, bleeding, or if you're not, dead, walk it off. I think
Yeah,
if you're
walk it
dead,
off.
you're still to walk it off.
Oh, yeah, they don't dare say that to their kids nowadays.
Hell no. Hell no. So, but you know what? I don't remember ever being spanked by any of the men in my family. None of
Oh,
them. Yeah. And I always was more comfortable around the men folk in our family. I don't know. I just wanted to be like them. I wanted to do what they did. The women sat around and yelled at kids and cooked and cleaned, and I was like, wow, that sucks. Oh, except I will say this. This is where I got my self-esteem from. This is a weird story. Please, I hope no one takes offense to this. This is what happened to me. This is my story. Okay. So we had a lady of color that lived in our area that would come and help mom when she was sick, or she would come and take care of me when mother was in the hospital having 2 babies. And so she wasn't there often. Okay. It's not like I had a nanny. She was just someone that was hired to come in and help. And she was right there. She was within a block of our house. Her name was Miss Lily. I loved Miss Lily. Loved her. She was always singing gospel songs and singing other songs that I didn't know. And I don't know, she just always seemed like she was focused but peaceful. You know what I mean? And I guess mom was in the hospital having my oldest brother, Kirk, and she was washing dishes, and I was standing there drying them and putting them up. And she looks over and she just kind of taps me on the shoulder. She goes, oh, Miss Deborah, you do good work for a white girl. And I was so proud. Oh my gosh. And looking back now, I realized that planted in my little head that people of color were better workers than white people were. And they had a standard of living to be aimed for, to be considered good or successful or excellent at a job, which is probably the complete opposite of 90% of white communities in the South. I'm just going to be blunt. Okay. But that is what I carry in my heart as a
pivotal
where,
moment.
yeah, because, I never got praised. My dad would always say to me, all right, how do you do that better? Or you missed a spot, or blah, blah, blah. Not overly critical, but never like, oh, way to go. Never got that hurrah,
Mm-hmm.
And I was a straight A student most of my life, and never got like extra privileges or anything, and never really got recognized for being a good student. It was like the A's are your reward. Well, hell, little Johnny got a friggin' A and got a quarter. Why can't I have a quarter? Then I would have to work so hard to buy my own damn bear, you know.
Well,
If I got an order for all my A's, I could have bought 10 bears.
I think that if kids get reinforcement, that's for good things, then that encourages more good things. So,
I didn't. I really didn't, which made me not a
but you had other influences though. You had Miss Lily and
yeah, but that was, short-lived. They were sparse. If it wasn't for my teachers, I was lucky. I loved school, and my teachers loved me. They didn't like me as a student. They loved me. Uh, I could just feel it. I think that they appreciated my inquisitiveness, my curiosity. I did drive one teacher nuts with my talking one year. But that was also the year my parents were getting a divorce, and I was getting picked on. Um, this lady really was lovely to me. I wish I could have found her before she passed and thanked her. Her name was Miss Toole, Tull, maybe Tulle, Miss Toole, Miss Toole, Toole, Toole. Okay, and she used to actually sing opera. And she told me I had a lovely little voice, and she taught me how to form my words when I was singing and stuff. And I remember one time I was doing that in the car and I was singing, and Mother looked over at me. She goes, "Why are you making those terrible faces?" Just totally deflated me. And I didn't sing for
well,
years.
that's how you make this sound.
Yeah, and I didn't sing for years. I mean, I didn't sing for years after that. But um, when I was in sixth grade when my parents divorced, and there was also the scandal with my dad at Cooper Tire. So the kids at school were telling me my dad was a thief, he was a punk, he was a thug. For whatever reason, because my parents were getting divorced, that made my mother a whore. And I mean, they would just taunt me relentlessly on the school grounds. So Miss Toole would let me stay in during recess and help her, pick up the room, grade papers, clean the chalkboard, whatever. And I mean, she was a godsend because she really saw what was going on and wanted to protect me. And I just loved her. I just loved her. So, okay, you're supposed to keep me on track. I think I just went off the rail.
Well, it was a part of your growing up and dealing with things. Um, so did you have any contact with your mother's family, with
A
her?
lot. Yeah. My aunt lived a block away from us, her older sister, Aunt Frances, and she had a ton of kids, and she had kids that were all older than me, and they had a ton of kids. So there were always kids running around the yard. And then her oldest son, Butch, lived in the house next to her. So they were always around. And it was Butch, and his wife's name was Loretta. And they had two children, Jeffrey and Marla. And they both were special needs children for different reasons. And so there were always kids down there, always activity going on. And of course, this is the day where none of us had air conditioning. So everybody's outside all the time. And and Aunt Frances raised chickens, and so there's chickens around, and there was beehives in the backyard. And I mean, you have to understand, this is a rough area. There's no sidewalks, there's no curbs. We didn't have concrete streets. We had gravel roads for a long time with the open ditches, that were covered in grass. And then eventually we got uptown and got tar. We got tar on our streets. And I can remember literally walking home in the summertime barefoot and that tar covering my entire foot, and you could just peel it off like soles,
By the time you got home?
Yeah, so had tough feet back then, real tough feet, you know. So but it's weird. I always related my dad's family to being more testosterone based. There was three sons and one daughter. And then my mother's family was more estrogen based because her mother, I was around her more than her dad, grandpa, and he was very quiet, and he spent a lot of time either playing dominoes or sitting in his chair. And then there was a bunch of aunts and with children. So that was my experience with them. So it was a completely different dynamic. um, I don't know. I will say this, the adults in my family seem to talk to me more than they
Mm,
did the other kids because I have stories that all of the adults told me that other cousins say, I never heard that. Like my mom's dad, grandpa, um, was supposed to have grown up on the Indian reservation in Oklahoma. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that means because all that land was Indian reservation many years ago. So in my mind, I always envisioned like there was a big fence around a big piece of property. You're now passing into Indian territory.
yeah,
That's how I
yeah.
envisioned it. But he said he got picked on a lot because he was redheaded and freckled and pale skin. And so everyone assumed that he was Native American in some sort because he lived on Native American territory. But I don't think that's the case. I need to delve deeper into our DNA, I think, to get that measured. But he told me several times that as a teenager, he worked on a boat. And of course, in my mind, I get a picture of a pirate ship. It was probably like a freighter or something like that. And they had a parrot on that boat, and that parrot cussed. And he would tell me all these things that that parrot would say. And I just found that hilarious because he's cussing. And, you know, and my grandma was Pentecostal. And I don't think I ever heard her say a cuss word. So those stories really kind of stuck with me. And he and my Uncle Jeff played dominoes all the time in the side yard at the house by the hydrangeas. But all the females in our family knew not to go close to Uncle Jeff. He was handsy.
Ah,
We all got that uncle. And I
yeah.
don't know that he ever did anything terribly wrong, but he made everybody terribly uncomfortable. And we all stayed away from him. So those are kind of my primary memories of him, and the fact that his fingertips were bright, bright yellow and brown because he rolled his own cigarettes for years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sat in his recliner and in fact, I have his stand-up ashtray in my bedroom. So it's weird how I have granddaddy's some of his pipes. He was a pipe smoker, and to this day, I love a good pipe. I love it. You
Yeah,
know,
my grandfather smoked a pipe, but then he went to cigars.
Well, I love cigars too. Gene Blevins, my friend, my dad's friend, he smoked cigars, and as nasty as those are, and his were nasty because he just chewed the tips off of them, just rah, 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 all the time. But I love the smell of tobacco and cigars, and every once in a while, when I'm really intensely working in the spiritual arena, I will smell those things, or I'll be walking through the house and I'll smell them. And it's very comforting, whether it's
Yeah.
imagination or whatever your belief system is, I don't give a damn. This is mine.
I when I smell cigars, my mind goes directly to my grandfather,
Yeah,
which
so
is a good thing.
yeah, yeah. I have to say this though. This is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
What do you mean?
Um, Trying to think about what to talk about first, and then even though I tell these stories and conversations to people that are friends and stuff, just sitting here and talking about it, it's very emotional. And I
I
think
would think
part
so.
of it is the fact that I am remembering things that I had long, long forgotten.
Well, I don't think you forgot it. You just kind of poked it away as something I don't need to think about right now.
Well, let's remember, I've had 9 concussions. No, I've got huge gaps, huge memory gaps. Like, time periods are like, oh hell, what happened during those 2 years? I don't know. You know,
so um so this relationship you have with your dad, your grandfather, and your your mom's parents, did that all come crashing to an end when you moved?
Mhm. So the hard part of my parents' divorce was not just that my family was split. I lost my family. We moved here to the Dallas area, which back then 3 hours was a long way away. And so my cousins were not just my cousins. Several of my cousins were also my best friends. So I lost contact with my best friends. I lost contact with my family. Back then, people didn't call, or at least my family didn't, because we were poor. I'm serious, we were poor. I grew up in a house that was 820 square foot.
Well,
Okay.
and you have to remember that to call then was a long distance telephone call, and you had to pay for that.
Yes. So I lost, my mother and stepdad would take us to Texarkana. And so I would get to see some of my mother's family during those times, but I was closer to my dad's side of the family, and I didn't get to see them. And then my mother had a falling out with her mother, and then I was in band. And now get this, we'll have to talk about this further later. I'm 14 years old, and my parents are going on vacation, leaving me at home so I can go to band camp here in Dallas. Now, does that strike anybody else as weird?
You're talking about 1970, right?
Well, it would have been 1974, 73, 75 in that area. But I'm 14 years old. I don't even have a car. So I have no way to get anywhere unless somebody picks me up and takes me, which I got rides and stuff. I had friends that helped me and stuff. But I'm just thinking that's the same age as my granddaughter right now. I don't want her at home for 3 hours by herself, much less
Um,
for 5 days.
the atmosphere now of just is so different.
Well, I
There's
have a
a
theory.
lot more people that are take advantage of others, and um,
Well, I have a theory, and then we'll close. My theory
okay.
is, I didn't get along with my stepdad, and we'll talk about my mother in a whole nother session.
That'll
But
take the whole session.
oh, I'll take about 10, um, at least. My theory is that the vacations and family trips were planned around when I would be away or doing something with band, so that I couldn't go. Because after 8th grade, I don't remember ever going on a family vacation. I don't remember ever going to any of the craft food family events, because it's where he worked, like going to Six Flags and things like that, ever after that time frame. And I just think that whether it was consciously or subconsciously, I was not included. So that's my theory.
And if you asked anybody, would you get a straight answer?
Well, hell no. Because I have asked that question. I have asked that question. Do I look like someone who doesn't ask the hard questions?
No, I know you're not.
I've asked a lot of hard questions, and um, I rarely get any satisfactory answers.
So, my mother, who she's in her, she's what, 84, 85, but she said in the summertime, and she told me that, their family was poor, but they lived in Iowa. She said she didn't have shoes for summer.
Oh no, we didn't
No.
want shoes. We didn't care. We didn't want them.
So when you were talking about walking down the street and had tar on your feet, so
No, we
I
would get flip-flops. We would have flip-flops, but those were for swimming up in the Rocky Rivers in Arkansas. You had to wear flip-flops, or your old tennis shoes where you had worn out a hole where the pinky toe peeks out, because those rocks would cut your feet. So, but no, we didn't wear shoes in the summertime. So, all
I didn't
right.
either, but it was by choice.
Well, I'm done. Put a fork in me. I'm done today.
Okay,
This was
so
emotional.
yeah, very emotional. And next time we'll take up with moving to Dallas, right?
Okay, well, let me make a note of that. Moving to Dallas, episode 3. Scarlett listened to my granddaughter listened to the first episode
Mhm.
yesterday, and she goes, "You sound the same on your podcast as you do in person." I go, "Well, doesn't everybody?" And she goes,
No,
"No."
they don't. No, they don't.
Okay, well, somebody needs to explain that to me like I'm a 2-year-old. I don't get it. So,
because they put on a persona. They want
Oh,
they want to seem different. They want to seem more interesting, maybe, or more serious, or more something else, or
well, I don't want to be more of anything, and I don't want to be less of anything. I just, and frankly, I'm doing this for me, people. If you enjoy it, I hope you do, but I'm doing this for me. So that's where I'm at. All right, so here we are. I'm no angel, but I've met the devil. This is Deborah Colleen Rose, and thank you for sharing time with me today.
bye now.